In this video, I wanted to talk for a minute about what can happen when you don't mulch sufficiently or manage a garden well, which is what occurred here. It looks okay now, or it will soon, but this is also, I don't mean to be self-deprecating, it happens sometimes, life happens, you plant things, you get busy with whatever else you're doing, and not everything always gets all the attention that you planned for it to get. And so I just thought I'd share a couple strategies for getting out of a super weedy mess. Here you can see this shot is just about what this whole garden looked like. And so what I've been doing, these are nursery beds that were planted with all kinds of things, which are mostly still here, but that was a little garlic planting that got taken out. But we really do need to get all these weeds down before they start dropping all these seeds, or else we'll have to take a different tact. But so you can see a lot of stuff is here. This is a new plant that I love, well, new to me, Sochan, Rudbeckia lacinata, and then miscanthus, yoga ginger, some sea berries. And the weeds in here looked basically like that. And you don't actually need that many weeds for them to take up that space. The really devious thing about weeding is that if you get rid of 95% of all the weeds when they're young, the last 5% will just take up 100% of the available space and get enormous. This is just one foxtail barley plant, all coming from one center. You can see how strong it is. It looks like a corn plant. And there aren't that many weeds on the ground, actually. The next weed is like over here. All this ground in between, there's nothing. So you don't need a lot of weeds to take up all the space. But anyway, right now what I'm doing is I'm either cutting them, like that foxtail barley, the root system is so strong that it'll rip up a huge amount of soil, so I'm cutting those, but everything else I'm ripping out and putting mulching in the walkways, which were already mulched. So they're getting covered, and I'm sort of stepping it down, and it doesn't take that much longer to organize the stuff as opposed to just, you know, you might just want to throw it off into the bushes. But if you lay it down in the walkways like this, you get all the organic matter. You're going to keep it moist because it's laying down covered with other weeds, and they'll start to decompose and provide nutrients for this whole system, food for all the microbes, carbon, getting into the soil. So it's a good way of cycling the nutrients that way. And if you really were worried about all these seeds dropping into the beds or anything like that, you could just cover this with wood chips themselves or hay, or just really organize them so that the seeds won't fall into the beds. These beds are going to be planted probably in the fall or spring and mulched. So I'm just going to bring in a round bale and mulch, maybe even 2 round bales, and mulch this whole garden. So I'm not that worried about annual weed seeds because they can't really make it through that kind of mulch. But I don't think I'm actually going to mulch these. I was planning on, there's some little weeds in here that will come back up. Maybe I'll mulch it after we finish weeding here. But essentially, part of the reason why the weeds got so big, other than just being really busy, is that if you're like me, you sort of walk by a planting and you see a lot of weeds are growing in there. And if you have a lot of things to do, it's almost just intimidating or something like that. You're just kind of like, I'm not going to deal with that today. It's too big. And then you miss a week or 2 weeks, and then it's kind of game over. But it's not really game over, because if you're gonna maintain it, you have to, it's just more work every time that you leave it. In the big picture, well, in the big picture of this garden, all this weed mulch material is really great, actually. It provided lots of food into the soil microbiome system while it was living, and now as it decomposes, it's going to provide a lot. The main thing you just want to avoid is allowing all that seed to drop. And of course, it is a little bit of work, more so than if you were to catch them when it's smaller. And I'm not saying that this is a good system by any means. It's just this planting never got mulched, which is why the weeds came up. But I don't really see it as a loss, is what I'm trying to say, because the plants did good things while they were here. They're going to do good things in their decomposition. And this whole garden is really only going to probably take maybe 5 hours of my time total to remediate this crazy weedy situation. And I really, I guarantee that when we go in a couple months from now, if I get to cap these walkways with straw or something, we go in a couple months from now, it's going to be beautiful decomposition under there and super good for the soil. And one of the problems with this garden this year, this is the first year that I've grown anything in here, from a patch of mugwort, it actually was way droughtier than I ever thought. This, look at, it's still bone dry. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but that may be a shadow there, but wow, it's still bone dry. I mean, we're 6 inches down and it doesn't look moist at all. So this garden was much drier than I thought it would be. And the more organic matter we can have in the walkways that are retaining a lot of moisture and decomposition, the more that'll feed a continuous drip of moisture into the beds in the future. So I'm gonna get back at it, finish weeding this out, and probably do an update at the end. I find myself wondering, in a post-mulch world, when you can't just buy bales of hay, what could you possibly have that would beat mugwort as far as a mulch that grows abundantly and can completely cover the ground and prevent any further weeds from growing? Of course, it's hard to control it, where it grows and where it doesn't, but this, just to put in perspective, the right side of the scene here, there's this broken down wall, and the right side, which is all nice garden space now, used to be the left side, just pure mugwort patch with black locust trees growing in it that were 20 feet tall. That little stub right there was probably a 35-footer, and there were many little black locusts growing in here. That was just last year that we cleared this out. We dug the beds, got some help from this little guy digging much deeper than I was able to do. We forked out as much of the mugwort roots as possible, and then used the rest of the stalks to mulch, and they were growing into the back into the garden through this kind of broken down part of the wall. But they weren't really, they're mugwort stalks coming up here and there, but we got enough of them out that I can just pull them out. And yes, it's going to be a continuous process of removing them every year, but it'll get easier and easier, and this year wasn't that bad. But if I were pressed, if there were no hay available or there are no wood chips available and I really needed to mulch, look at the endless sea of mulch that you have right there. All of this I just did with clippers, just harvesting the mugwort that was growing in, and now it's a beautiful weed suppressing mulch for the pathways. I probably wouldn't use it in the beds themselves, although one could certainly do that maybe not in a nursery bed context, but to establish a tree planting, I don't think any allelopathic compounds in the stalks would really make much of a difference, but that's up for debate. If you know anything about that, please comment and let me know. But yeah, maybe I'm destroying my garden beds here for years to come. I don't think so. I've done this before. It's not too bad anyway. But so that's all. I may actually cover these other ones. If I can't get hay, I may actually cover these ones in mugwort stalks as well, because they don't have any viable seeds on them yet. And they'll help rot down whatever annuals in there do have viable seeds. So then you've got this beautiful ground cover and, you know, just a couple hours of getting down in there with hands and a clipper, and we're back into pretty good way here with not many weeds left and a lot of plants. And now I've got some clear garden space that I will probably seed to a cover crop right away. And we're back on track for this garden. So this is a few days later after the weeds have sort of died down and really begun to mulch the pathways. These are a hybrid poplar that can grow 15 feet in a year. These are from just little cuttings that rooted out in the spring. So you can imagine, after getting established like this for one season, the next year it's just off to the races. And then here are elderberry plants, black currant plants all the way down, blackberries. These are thornless primocane variety that, oh no, these are not primocane, these are triple crown. These are floricane, so they are normal growth pattern. They'll fruit on the second year of a cane, but thornless, which is really nice. This is sweet grass. Actually really very vigorous, strong growing grass. Getting bitten by a lot of mosquitoes. Ashwagandha, sweet Sicily. So there's a lot of things in here. This is actually kind of funny. I had planted a bunch of persimmons, and the only ones that survived were right next to this chard. I don't know if that had something to do with moisture. And I had seeded these beds where the garlic came out of with cowpeas, oats mix, and that'll grow really vigorously for the rest of the season and then winter kill, so we'll have a nice mulch. The ginger is doing well with that rain. So now I'll have to decide whether I want to extend into the sea of mugwort once again, or maybe next year I don't do that. Maybe I just stay content with this size of a garden over here and just maintain it a little bit better. Considering my luck this year with not getting in here on time, it still came through all right, but no need to double in size and expand when you've had that experience of losing it to weeds. But the great thing about these, especially the woody perennials, all of the herbaceous ones too, is that they can get taken over by annual weeds and still make it out of it. This side over here, it's a sort of tropical guild. This is the Tunia sinensis, which is really sort of blowing my mind actually. This is up to about 4.5 feet now. And this is what you eat here. Well, you would eat it in the spring, but these fresh leaves coming out have a deep like onion beef bouillon flavor. An incredible nutrient profile. This is the yacon. They can get bigger than this, but this is about the size that I would expect. They've got an incredible edible tuber, sort of like jicama, but a lighter, crunchier, sweeter vibe. Also heavy with inulin, but never made me have any gas like Jerusalem artichokes did. Very easy to digest, for me anyway. And this is a weirdo tropical guild with the Musa Baju banana. Wow. There's a horsefly stalking me. It's about the size of a small car. And then there's moonflower, datura, with buddleia seedlings. I don't know how they grew that much in 1 year. Those are seedlings from, yeah, that's a buddleia seedling from this spring, which is pretty wild. And then this is interplanting of lemongrass, with taro. Most of them, well, all of them will come out in the fall. The lemongrass is an annual here, and the other ones can be perennial, but need to come out. Well, the tunia can stay in here. I think that's just about zone 6B hardy, but any colder than that and it won't work. And one cool little experiment here that actually worked out well. I don't know how much I'll do it in the future, but this is a second-year pawpaw, which is not that impressive for a 2-year-old pawpaw, but I planted it in an anise hyssop, and it totally protected it. Not that they need that much protection, but they do want shade when they're really little, and the mint family herbs really can take over the ground really well, and it doesn't seem like it slows the pawpaw down too much. And then the catalpa that was pollarded. Such a cool plant. It's a really good one for mulch because it can, this was cut to the ground actually, so that's a 2-year-old stem, and then all of these green shoots are just this year, and the leaves are so enormous and beautiful shape. And it sort of just gives the space a kind of different vibe, and has beautiful flowers and can turn into a 60-foot tall tree. Anyway, that's what the garden looks like now.